I walked into my brother's engagement party, already feeling out of place. Crystal glasses clinked, music hummed. Perfume hung heavy in the air. Then I heard her. The bride leaned toward her friends and whispered just loud enough that the stinky country girl had arrived. Laughter followed. My chest tightened, but I didn't react. None of them knew I was standing in a hotel I owned, or that this night wasn't ending in toasts. Before I get into what happened next, tap like and tell me where you're listening from and if you've ever been quietly underestimated, because what happened after that whisper changed everything forever. My name is Peyton Barnes. I'm 32 and for most of my life, I've learned how to take up very little space. I speak softly. I listen more than I talk. I wear simple clothes that don't announce anything about me. Not because I lacked confidence, but because I learned early that being underestimated can be safer than being noticed. I grew up in a small town where everyone knew everyone else's business. My older brother, Ethan, was the star. Teachers loved him. Neighbors praised him. My mother, Margaret, built her pride around him without ever meaning to hurt me. It just happened. At the dinner table, his achievements filled the room. Mine were met with polite nods, like background noise. The only person who truly saw me was my grandmother. She had a way of holding my hand a second longer than necessary, like she was grounding me in the world. When I was a teenager, she told me I was a builder, not of houses or things, but of stability. She promised me a necklace that had been passed down through the women in our family. She said it would be mine one day because I would need the reminder more than anyone else. I learned how everything worked. I saved. I invested carefully. I didn't tell my family. They never asked. For years, I sent money back anonymously. Payments, bills, repairs, medical costs. I didn't want credit. I just wanted them to be okay. So, when the invitation to Ethan's engagement party arrived late and almost as an afterthought, I still went. Part of me hoped things had changed, that maybe this time I would walk into a room and feel like I belonged. Standing in that ballroom, though, watching my mother beam beside Ethan and his fiancée, I realized I was still the afterthought. I just hadn't admitted it yet. I tried to disappear into the edges of the room. That's a skill you develop when you grow up knowing you're tolerated and not celebrated. I stood near a tall table, fingers wrapped around a cold glass, watching the party move around me like I wasn't part of it. My mother floated from group to group, smiling too wide, telling the same stories about Ethan. Every sentence started with his name. When she finally noticed me, her smile tightened. Her eyes dropped to my jeans and boots, then back to my face. She leaned in and asked quietly but pointedly if I'd considered wearing something more appropriate. She said Ethan's fiancé came from a refined family, stressing the word like it was a correction. I told her I came straight from work. She sighed the same tired sigh she'd used my whole life and turned away before I finished the sentence. That's when I saw it. The necklace. It rested against Lena's collarbone, catching the light every time she laughed. The delicate chain, the small familiar pendant, my grandmother's necklace, the one she'd promised to me while squeezing my hand in a hospital room that smelled like antiseptic and fading hope. My stomach dropped so hard I felt dizzy. I watched Lena move through the crowd, graceful and polished, accepting compliments like they were owed to her. The necklace looked wrong on her, not because she didn't look good, but because it didn't belong there. I was still staring when she found me. She approached with a smile that never reached her eyes, placing a hand lightly on my arm like we were close. She suggested we talk somewhere quieter. As soon as we were out of earshot, her expression changed. The sweetness vanished. She told me she knew all about me, about the money I sent home, about how I lived modestly. She asked why someone like me would keep helping people who never seemed to appreciate it. Then she answered her own question. She said it was probably because I was desperate to matter. Her words were soft, controlled, designed to bruise without leaving marks. She finished by telling me that once she married Ethan, it would be better if I kept my distance. Fewer complications that way. She patted my arm, turned, and walked back into the party. My grandmother's necklace glinting against her skin. I stood there perfectly still. I didn't cry. I didn't confront her. Something inside me simply went quiet. The part of me that kept hoping this family would one day choose me finally shut its door. And in that silence, I understood something clearly for the first time. This night wasn't just uncomfortable. It was dangerous. I needed air. Real air, not the kind filtered through chandeliers and forced smiles. I slipped out of the ballroom and into the hallway where the carpet muted my footsteps and the noise dropped to a low hum. This part of the hotel felt different, familiar, controlled. It always grounded me. That's when I heard voices. I slowed without meaning to. Ahead of me, near the corner by the service elevators, Howard Whitmore stood with his phone pressed tight to his ear. His back was turned, his shoulders tense. He didn't notice me. He was too busy arguing in a low, urgent voice. I caught fragments. Words like after the wedding cash flow and we just need them to believe it a little. He paused, listened, then said something that made my stomach clench. He mentioned my family, not by name but by implication, their stability, their ability to help. He hung up and straightened his expression, snapping back into a polished smile before he walked away. I stood there longer than I should have, my pulse steady, my mind racing. That call wasn't panic. It was calculation. I went down to the parking garage and sat in my car with the engine of the concrete walls pressing in around me. I pulled up old records on my phone. Transfers, payments, bills I'd covered for years, mortgage support, medical costs, always anonymous, always quiet. My family thought they were doing fine on their own. And apparently someone else thought that meant opportunity. The pieces slid into place with uncomfortable ease. The Whitesers didn't care about Ethan or love or family. They cared about access, about what they believed my family represented. And if they were wrong, if the money wasn't really there, the fallout would crush everyone involved. I wasn't guessing anymore. I was confirming. I texted Daniel Cross and asked him to meet me near the service entrance. When he arrived, I didn't explain everything. I didn't have to. I asked him to run background checks on the Whitmores. Quietly, thoroughly, he nodded once and left. Then I called my lawyer. Rachel answered immediately. I told her I needed options, fast ones. I also called Hannah, someone who understood numbers the way most people understood emotions. I asked her to look for patterns, anything that didn't add up. I went back upstairs, composed, almost detached. Inside, the party continued. Music, laughter, glasses raised. But something fundamental had shifted. This wasn't about being insulted anymore. It wasn't even about the necklace. It was about stopping something before it destroyed my family. And if that meant the truth had to come out in the most public way possible, then so be it. It ended with truth, and that I realized was far more powerful. The days that followed felt quieter, like the world had exhaled after holding its breath too long. The investigations moved forward without drama. There were statements, meetings, careful language. Consequences unfolded the way they always do when truth is finally allowed to stand on its own. Ethan came by a few days later. No excuses, no speeches. He looked smaller, somehow stripped of the certainty he'd worn his whole life. He told me he kept replaying the signs he'd ignored. I told him healing doesn't start with explanations. It starts with listening. He nodded like that was something new to him. My mother called after that. Her voice didn't carry authority this time. It carried weight. She said she hadn't known. I told her that wasn't the same as not being responsible. I showed her the records again, the payments, the bills, the years I'd stayed invisible so no one would feel indebted to me. She cried quietly, not to be forgiven, but because something had finally broken open. The necklace came back to me without ceremony. I didn't put it on right away. I held it for a long moment instead, feeling the cool metal settle into my palm like a promise kept, even if it arrived late. We didn't fix everything. Not even close. But the pretending stopped, and that mattered more than apologies. Some endings aren't clean. They're honest. And honesty, I've learned, is the first real step toward peace. A few weeks later, I hosted a small breakfast at the hotel. A young woman from a rural town sat at the table nervous, unsure if she belonged. I made sure she did. Watching her listen, learn, and slowly relax reminded me why I stayed quiet for so long, and why I don't have to anymore. If you've ever been underestimated, overlooked, or made to feel small by your own family, you're not alone. Share your story in the comments. And if this resonated with you, subscribe so you don't miss what comes next.